I'm Kathryn Viner and I'm the minister of Malone Presbyterian Church, and in May I went to Greece for a week to visit refugee camps and projects that were trying to assist the refugees in the situation that they were finding themselves in. I went with representatives from Christian Aid and as well as representatives from churches from across the UK and Ireland. The delegation was entirely female for the purpose that we wanted to highlight the fact that 70% of refugees are now women and children, and it was an opportunity for us to show solidarity with the women who were now in these camps in Greece. Another reason was to listen to their stories and finally then to bear witness, to come home and to share what we'd heard, because the media doesn't always reflect the full picture, so maybe this might be another piece in the jigsaw to give a better understanding of what the refugees are experiencing and how we might help them better. The trip was organised in such a way that we were to follow the journey that typically the refugees would go on. So we began on one of the Greek islands in Samos, and then we travelled from there across to Athens, and from Athens up to Thessaloniki, and then back to Athens again. And the reason we went back to Athens again is because in the north of Greece, the Macedonian border is closed, and therefore a significant number of the refugees who made the journey up north were then making the journey back down south again to the capital. When we began in Samos, we visited an official camp in Samos, and my first impressions of that camp were the 8-foot high fences and the barbed wire and the guards standing at the gates, and the faces of men, women and children looking through the fence at us, and then as we approached, begging us to come towards them to speak to them. And I was quite shocked that that was the first impression I had of the conditions that the refugees were living in. In this particular camp in Samos, it's home to over 1,000 refugees. It's an old military base that is only really meant to hold 250 people. And so the refugees are crammed into this military base, and their conditions are completely unsatisfactory. They are just given a tent. They're not given any other form of bedding or chairs or tables, although I know that some of the NGOs are trying to provide some bedding for the refugees. The camp itself is built on a slope, on a quite a steep slope, and it's overlooking one of the towns and one of the bays, as it was originally positioned as a military base. And so it's not ideal for any sort of long-term living conditions, which is now what the refugees are finding themselves in. It was originally only a registration centre that they would be in for maybe 48 hours or maybe 72 hours to get their registration as refugees processed, and then they would move on to the mainland. However, now it's a detention camp until they can process whether they are asylum seekers or whether they are economic migrants, and try and differentiate that process. If they do qualify as or are recognised as refugees, then that process takes at the minute, and we're being told the process takes anything between 18 months and 2 years. So they are trapped in that camp potentially for that length of time if the bureaucracy stays at the same level of what it is, which requires that length of time to process their documents. As a result of now this particular camp in Samos, which is typical of the 50 camps across Greece, this camp in Samos, the atmosphere was very tense because the refugees recognise that this is somewhere that they are going to have to live in for an unknown period of time. And it's not just Syrian refugees. There are Iraqis there. There are people fleeing from Iran. There are Afghanis. There are also those coming from some of the African nations. And then you add to that then the economic migrants who are present in the camp. And you can imagine the tension. And the tension was palpable. It wasn't a place where you could walk around freely. People were desperate. They were coming up, begging for information about any sort of health care, wanting to know about what was happening outside of the camp. Did we have any news of any progress in recognising that they are refugees and they desire better conditions and a better status. They only have limited access to healthcare on particular days for a particular period of time, and if you don't, if you're not the number of, if you're not in a good position in the queue, you're unlikely to be seen. They aren't allowed to cook their own food, therefore they have to queue up for that as well. On top of that, they only have limited access to any sort of legal support. And so a typical day in the camp is sitting around and waiting. And if you can imagine doing that day after day after day, without even having the dignity of being able to make your own breakfast, and then your lunch, and then your tea, at least to pass the time, and all that goes with that, there's nothing to do. In the camp in Samos, they had created a makeshift school, but only the boys and the men were allowed to attend the school. And we saw them at the school, which was underneath a tree, sitting on the ground, and one of the men who had previously been a teacher was trying to teach them some arithmetic, but also trying to teach them a little bit of English language.